A couple of months ago, I reviewed the entire Seamaster 75th anniversary lineup of watches. Notably, one watch was missing and in my opinion is the most exciting watch out of the released 8. Today we're gonna right the wrong of not covering the watch and give it full treatment. I'm gonna give you all the specs, all my opinions, and of course some close-up shots of this watch. First, a little bit of history about this watch. I'm not going to go into too much detail. This is not a history lesson, just a general overview so you understand what we're dealing with here. The original was released in 1971. If you can put yourself in the mind space of someone from 1971, you can understand that this was really a tool. It was a tool for divers and it was a serious tool. 1200 meters or 4000 feet of water resistance is no laughing matter. Also, the watch featured a monoblock case. We're going to talk more about that later. Then in 1979, the watch was discontinued because it was so niche, it was so specialized that I guess Omega wasn't making enough money selling these watches. Then during Baselworld 2009, Omega remembered that hey, they have this hot model from 1970s, let's reissue it. Then again in 2017, they reissued the model, but this time in a titanium case. And that model can still be purchased from Omega. Usually these are not watches that you find in stores because they're so niche. Not a lot of people are actually buying them. So if you want to buy one, you have to order one ahead of time. And because of that, not a lot of people know about this model or really understand how special this model is. Well, now in 2023, Omega has released their collection of 8 new Seamaster watches, and one of the most exciting ones was this Ploprof. It comes in a stainless steel 55mm case. That's 55mm across the watch from left to right, but notably it's only 45mm from one lug to another. So actually it has exact the same proportions as the 1971 original version. The watch is also only 15.5mm thick. Now 15.5mm might sound like a lot, but remember this is a watch with 1200 meters of water resistance. The sapphire crystal alone on this watch takes some serious engineering. The case is actually not made out of stainless steel. I mean it is, but it's called O steel or the Omega steel. It's their proprietary alloy. Apparently it has some special properties, some anti-corrosion properties and such, but to me it looks quite a bit like stainless steel. The finishing on the case is all satin finish with some chamfered edges for highlights. The finishing is excellent. It's exactly what you would find in a watch over $10,000. Now, as I mentioned before, this watch is a monoblock watch case design. That means that this case is made out of one piece of steel. Less chances for water to get through and get into the watch. These monoblock cases became very rare because it's harder to engineer a watch like this. Even the case back on this watch is part of the case. It's not a screw down case back. It cannot be removed. It is part of the case construction. By the way, the case back features the same engraving as the rest of the 75th anniversary Seamaster watches. You might be wondering, since the case back cannot be removed, how do you actually service the movement? How do you get in? Well, you do that through the front. The sapphire crystal is actually screwed into the case, so to access the movement you would have to unscrew the sapphire crystal. You of course need a specialty tool for that. Then you can remove the dial and access the movement for servicing, for fixing the movement, for anything that you would need to access the movement for. This sort of over-engineering is why I love Omega. Speaking of over-engineering, let's talk a little bit about this bezel. It's a bidirectional 60-click bezel with a sapphire bezel insert, and the bezel is actually loomed. What makes this bezel different is that button by the 2 o'clock position. You press this giant button and then you can rotate the bezel. So the bezel is locked in place with this giant button. It is of course there for safety. When you're going saturation diving, you definitely don't want any rotation on the bezel, and this feature just ensures that the bezel will not be turned without your permission. But of course there is a slight downside of this. What I found from my time with this watch, you can't really rotate the bezel using one hand. On usual diver watch, you can just rotate the bezel. If it's a unidirectional bezel, you rotate it to one side and that's it. In this case, you actually have to take the watch off of your wrist to operate the bezel, or you can ask your friend to push that button down while you rotate the bezel. There is no other way. The other weird over-engineered part of this case construction is of course this crown at the 9 o'clock position. As you can see, it has this giant wheel, and you would assume, hey, that's the crown. But that's actually not the crown. That's the mechanism to unscrew the crown. You unscrew it as such, and then the crown itself pops out. Operating the crown works exactly the same way as any other watch. You pop it out once, and in this case, you can rotate the hours hand so you can jump 1 hour increments, which is very useful. There's no date complication here, otherwise that usually would control the date wheel. You pop out the crown second time, and you can operate the minutes and the hours hand. If you've been paying attention to this video, you probably noticed that the seconds hand is not ticking. Well, that's because this is a prototype watch with a dummy movement, meaning that the watch is exactly the same as the one that you would buy from the store. It's just the movement doesn't work. It operates the same way to demonstrate how the hours hand jumps and how to set the time and how to screw and unscrew the crown, but doesn't actually tick. So excuse that, that's the best I could do to get my hands on one of these watches, as they're very difficult to spot. Speaking of, a huge thank you to Omega Boutique here in Vancouver for lending me this watch for a review and letting me film it. To screw the crown back in place, you have to first line up the logo. It is a signed crown. Once you line up the logo in a perfect position, you push the crown in, and then you use this giant wheel to screw the crown into place. So you don't actually turn the crown itself, you turn this giant wheel. The very first question that comes into mind when you see a watch like this is, how does it actually wear on the wrist? Well, here it is on my 7.5 inches wrist, and surprisingly, it actually wears pretty well. I mean, it's no Black Bay 58 comfort, but it is more comfortable than you would assume a watch like this would be. I could wear this watch all day and it would be fine, because majority of the bulkiness of this case is at the 9 o'clock position, and since I wear my watch on the left hand, it doesn't really affect the wearability of the watch at all. It's also not overly thick. I mean, 15.5 millimeters is quite thick, but it is still reasonable, so you could wear this watch all day. Since this Ploprof is part of the 75th anniversary lineup of Seamaster watches, it features this gradient blue dial. Something I forgot to mention in my overview of the lineup of these watches is the fact that the dials get darker and darker the more water resistance the watch has. Sort of, you move down under the water, and of course the ocean is darker, so the dials get darker. So this is second to the darkest, right before ultra deep. Ultra deep has the most water resistance, so it has the darkest dial. This one is the second darkest, and I actually really like this shade of blue. I think it works very well. It works well in a combination with this blue bezel. On some of the other Seamasters in this release, the blue of the dial doesn't really work well with the blue of indexes. The two colors seem to be too similar to each other and they don't have enough contrast. Not the case with this watch. I think the contrast is just perfect. It's very legible yet attractive. The movement powering this model is the same as the model from 2017. It's caliber 8912, a coaxial automatic movement that's a certified master chronometer, and it's also MATAS certified. It has 60 hours of power reserve, it has that jumping hours hand, and it's actually exactly the same movement as you can find in the new Planet Ocean Ultra Deep or the Seamaster 300, the one without the date. As I mentioned already, this watch has a dummy movement, so I can't demonstrate that high beat seconds hand ticking, but just imagine it ticking at 28,800 vibrations per hour. The watch comes on a thick rubber strap. It has these giant holes for ventilation, but also for resizing. The strap is long enough so you will have plenty of clearance to put this watch over your wetsuit if you choose to take it diving. The strap is integrated into the case using your standard pins. From the first glance, it looks as if the strap is integrated into the case because of these straight lugs, but no, you can put a different strap option on this watch if you really wanted to. You also get this loop that says Ploprof on it and a tank buckle. The watch doesn't come with one of these fancy Omega clasps. It's your standard tank buckle. It just gets the job done. In my opinion, this is one of the coolest and weirdest watches that Omega offers. It's a true enthusiast watch. Someone who already has a Seamaster or maybe even a couple of Seamasters in their collection. Someone who already experienced a bunch of different watches and now wants something completely different, completely out of the box. You also have to appreciate the history behind this watch and appreciate the engineering behind it, because just having something that's out of the box is not enough for you to really pull a trigger on something like this. You have to be a certain type of personality, and if you are that personality, I want to talk to you at any party. This is a watch that if I see in a wild, I'll give you a handshake and I'm gonna know that you know a thing or two about watches. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this in the future, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about this Ploprof. Does it do it for you? Do you think it's ridiculous? Do you maybe have one in your collection? Leave your thoughts below. I always enjoy reading your comments. Thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye.